I'm going to start letting people in.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. We're so excited to have you here for our second annual winter camp and either our fourth or our fifth Future MDs in STEM program. So we'll get started in a second. Just some quick reminders. If you have questions throughout the session, you're more than welcome to raise your hand on Zoom. You can ask it in the chat. Austin will also have time at the end of his presentation to answer some of your questions. So you're more than welcome to do that. Also a reminder to please keep yourself on mute when Austin's presenting, so that way it's not distracting to other people. Closed captioning has been turned on. We're also live streaming this to our YouTube channel, and I'll start recording this as well as soon as Austin gets started. And so Austin will do his presentation and answer some of your questions, and then we'll move into our workshop component, and then we'll do an interactive and we'll wrap up for the day. So Austin, you're more than welcome to take it over.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm really excited to be here. So it looks like there's still some people joining, so maybe we can wait maybe another minute or 2 minutes, and then once we sort of reach a quorum, we can begin. I'll start sharing my screen, and please feel free to be as interactive as possible. It makes this a much more enjoyable process and better for me as a presenter as well. So just feel free. Just feel free to go ahead and chime in if you have questions. If you're more comfortable putting in the chat, I will do my best to keep track of it, but looks like there's already a couple hundred messages I'm behind on. So just feel free to raise your hand, and I'll make sure to leave some time for questions at the end as well. So we'll just give it another minute. Yes, I would do my best to speak as slowly as I can and as clearly. If there's anything that I brush over too quickly, just let me know. Sometimes I have a tendency to do that. We have a question. Is it Mazen? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
Yeah, no problem. Can please the chat be used to the directors, whether the host or the host, to reduce distractions or not be in public? I'll be thankful if does that.
Yeah, so we can't control the chat completely, but if you all are here on Zoom and you could keep the chat to just program stuff, that would be very helpful. Thank you so much.
All right. Any other questions before we get started? And I'll make sure to have some time for questions at the end as well. So I'll just wait to see if there are any show of hands before we begin, and I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Okay, can I record this session?
Yep, just to make sure everyone's muted. Yeah, Mohammed, do you have a question? I see a hand raised.
Is the camera required?
No, it's not required. You don't have to have your camera on. I mean, it's lovely if we can see you, but it's definitely not required.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think we're good on questions.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'll go ahead and get my PowerPoint ready. What was that? All right, I'm going to go ahead and go into presenter mode. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I think that was just someone that might have been off mute by accident.
All right, no worries. All right, everyone. So I will be presenting just a brief overview on medical school admissions process. I know many of you are interested in applying to medical school. You're probably somewhere in college right now. So just a brief background about myself. My name is Austin Wynn. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. That's where I've done the majority of my training and schooling. So I went to University of Illinois, Chicago for undergrad. I graduated in 2019. I graduated in 3 years, and I went straight to medical school at the University of Illinois College of Medicine. And I'll be graduating in just 3 short months, counting down the days, and I'll be going in orthopedic surgery and start my residency this year. I enjoy to play sports and travel when I'm not doing anything medically related. And then I also have a YouTube channel that I will reference throughout this PowerPoint, but that's something that has been a fun hobby for me. I started during the pandemic, and mentorship has been important to me. I feel like it's been very difficult at times to, go into medicine. Neither of my parents are doctors, and I've just been really lucky to have good mentors. So I try to do, the best that I can through talks like this and just going to friends or other pre-med events just to help out and provide my 2 cents while also filming free YouTube videos for everyone, just to give some advice on the whole process. So that's kind of a little bit about me. And let's start with our talk. So I think, the first thing that a lot of people think about is, why do you want to go into medicine? So I think the most important thing is to remember you have to think about your reason, find your why and why you want to go into it. There's so many pros and cons. There's differences practicing in this United States versus somewhere else. And there's also so many great healthcare career options. So there are a lot of different opportunities that you may have. So it's a long journey. Try to enjoy the process and take it one step at a time. Before we move on, I think we had a raised hand. whoever that was. I didn't see the name, but you can go ahead and ask. Yeah, Yusuf, go ahead.
What is your name
What is my
of
name? You said?
your YouTube channel?
Oh yeah, it would be
What's
my
your
first
name
and
of
last
your
name.
YouTube channel?
Yeah, Austin Win Med. It should come up right away, and I'll have the links, and I can put it in the chat towards the end of the talk as well. All right.
Yes.
Looks like we have a couple more hands raised. Let me see if I can figure out how to see that. But if you are just willing to speak up, you can go ahead, whoever has their hand raised.
Okay, so my name is Razan. I just wanted to ask something.
Yeah.
You came across why would you go to medical field and things like that, like School of Medicine. So I had a question, like, basically, I really want to go to School of Medicine, but not to be a doctor and treat others. I just want to search for things. I want to search for a cure for a certain disease. So is this the right path? Like, should I go to School of Medicine or should I choose something else?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. So from what I'm hearing from you, not thinking about the practice of treating patients and treating them with the current techniques and methods and medicines that we currently have, but sort of researching and figuring out what is out there. That sounds to me more like a PhD route. So, there are people that go to the same amount of schooling, 4 years of graduate school, and get a PhD in a specific topic, such as gene therapy or studying Alzheimer's disease, for example, specifically. And their job and mission is not to directly treat patients in the hospital, but to come up with novel treatment opportunities, therapeutics, different drugs and medications, testing it and finding cures to things that currently have no cures. So one of those things is Alzheimer's disease. There's no cure for that. So there's a lot of dedicated research and doctors, PhD doctors that go and research those topics. And maybe that might be a better avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Remis, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to go medicine, but I don't know how to choose a definite concept. I don't choose. There's a lot of concepts in medicine. I don't choose. Can you have a way? Do you have a way to choose to teach me to choose?
Yeah, just to clarify, are you referring to specific subspecialties in medicine? Such as like orthopedic surgery, dermatology, cardiology. Is that what you're referring to, or different types of healthcare careers? I just want to make sure I answer your question right.
I don't know how to choose my career, the special career in medicine.
Okay, so I think there are two parts to that. So first and foremost is deciding if you want a career in medicine versus other healthcare specialties like nursing and pharmacy, dentistry, physical therapy, and so on and so forth. So if you're referring to medicine specifically, there are a lot of different avenues that you can take. So in medical school, after you finish, you'll choose a specialty to subspecialize in. So for me, like I'm going into orthopedic surgery, I'll focus on operating and fixing broken bones, torn ligaments, muscles, and tissues. Which is different than going into something like gastroenterology, where you deal with the GI system, or cardiology, where you deal with the heart. So I think a lot of those things you figure out once you start medical school. If that's the route you're thinking, you sort of learn and rotate through different specialties throughout the 4 years of medical school, and then you can decide what you want to further specialize in for your career. As far as, deciding between dental, medicine, pharmacy, and all the different specialties, I think it's a topic that probably would need a little bit more time than what we have today to dive into. But there's a lot of different pros and cons. And, on my YouTube channel, I talk about dental school versus medical school, which is a video I recently filmed. But obviously there are a lot of different healthcare careers that are really awesome too, like pharmacy or physical therapy that, you just need to figure out what is best for you. And so maybe talking to a mentor or shadowing those different healthcare professions can really help out. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Also, if we could keep the questions for the end of Austin's segment, so that way he can get through his PowerPoint first and then really focus on answering all of your questions at the end, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a pause on the questions for right now. Sorry for the two people that are waiting. I might answer some of those questions as I'm going through the PowerPoint. But if there's anything about a particular slide or something that's confusing, I don't want to just gloss over it. So feel free to chime in during that moment. So just talking briefly about the medical school admissions process and some of the statistics that exist. Of course, this is more directly related to applying to United States medical schools, so MDs or DOs, but obviously the metrics will be similar likely in other places as well. So we're going to talk just briefly from the most recent 2021-2022 cycle. Here's the median MCAT and GPA. It's important to keep in mind that GPA is split between a science and a non-science GPA. So you can't just, choose an easy major or pad your GPA by taking classes that are easier to get an A. They'll look at the differences between science and non-science. And keep in mind that the prerequisites to apply to medical school often include science classes like general chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry, physics, and things like that will definitely go into that science GPA. So make sure you meet with a counselor or whatever university or school you're going to make sure you're taking all the required classes. This last paragraph here is just a long way of saying that it's getting more and more competitive. So I think the earlier you know and the earlier you start and prepare, the better. This past cycle, there were 22,000 applicants or so, or 22,000 accepted applicants out of a pool of 62,000 or more. So that's about a 36% acceptance rate, and that's gone down pretty much every single year. Go ahead, Doha. I think there's a question. Doha, maybe. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Yeah, I see your hand raised. If there's a question you have on this slide, you can go ahead.
If you have studied the medicine in United States by scholarship,
Sorry, what was that?
if you want to study the medicine in United States by scholarship, is it there is?
Yeah, great question. So there are some scholarships that exist. They're dependent on the specific medical school. So some have them, but the criteria for scholarship is a lot more difficult, I think, when you get to graduate school in the United States compared to undergraduate. So there are a lot of scholarship options for people going to college and learning and graduating with a major, but there are not too many scholarships for a medical school, unfortunately, but there are a lot of opportunities to take loans and to have government assistance during medical school. So that's similar to what most American medical students would do as well, because it's very expensive, unfortunately. Yeah, Miriam, go ahead.
So I wanted to ask, as an international student applying to like US medical schools, it's gonna be super competitive. So is it better to study in the US or go study in another country, like European countries, so I can guarantee a seat?
Yeah, great question. The admissions rates obviously are going down and down. My highest recommendation and what I mentor to students is that, of course, the best option would be to go to a USMD program. Just consistently, those USMD students have the best match rates into, competitive specialties. They have, more opportunity, I believe, but it does not mean that that's the only route and that you can't become a doctor if you don't choose to go to USMD or get admitted into a USMD program. So the next level I would say would be DO programs. They're still in the US and they're still a equal medical degree as an MD. However, it is more difficult because there are less opportunities. There's less DO programs. And I think that even though MDs and DOs share residencies now, a lot of programs still accept either just DOs or just MDs. So for example, you might not know you want to go into something competitive like surgery. And when you go to a DO program, it might be more difficult to match into orthopedics or dermatology, for example. And then finally, your question with Caribbean schools, you would get an MD and it's, a way of getting it internationally, and the admissions is much easier, right, to get admitted to those programs. But what I found, I've worked with students through my tutoring company that go to medical school in the Caribbean, as well as, having family members and people near to my life that have gone that route. It is difficult in other ways because applying to residency in the United States, graduating as an IMG or an international medical graduate, the admissions percentage of matching into US residency is much more difficult than coming from a DO or an MD program. So I would say, if you know for sure you want to be a doctor and you want to go down this route, do your best on your MCAT, do your best on your application, try to apply to AMCAS and ACOMAS, the MD and DO programs. And if that continues to not be favorable, then you can consider Caribbean options. And within the Caribbean schools too, there's a hierarchy in terms of like, different programs. So Ross Medical School is pretty good, St. George's, St. Matthew's, Saba. And then there are other ones that might not be as good and might not have as much support for you. So those are some things that you should think about. Does that answer your question?
In your opinion, how can I get a scholarship in a medical university?
Yeah, that's a tough question for me to answer right now. I think the best bet would be to, look at specific programs. It's hard to apply broadly to, let's say, like 30 medical schools and, look for scholarships at all of them. A lot of times scholarship options are specific to each medical school. So maybe choosing a couple, looking at their websites, calling the admissions office, you can figure out what type of opportunities they have for international students. But other than that, there's unfortunately no easy answer for that.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, just a quick reminder. I see that there are a ton of hands up, and that's really awesome that you all are asking such great questions. But again, we're going to try to keep the questions for the end of Austin's segment so he can go through his PowerPoint. So if you have your hand raised right now, that's awesome. But Austin will probably get to that later. That's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Davina. Sounds good. I'll continue to move on, and I promise that there will be plenty of time for questions at the very end. All right, so this is something I'll go quickly sort of over, but basically this chart, the purpose of it is just to show that a lot of students will ask, especially people going to college here in the US, like, what do I need to major in to have the best chance of getting into medical school, or what do I need to study? And honestly, you should study what is most interesting to you. That's what will stand out the most as you apply to medical school, and they ask you questions like, oh, why did you major in philosophy? Or why did you major in physics or chemistry or biology? So it doesn't always have to be biological sciences. That was my major in undergrad, but that's just because I didn't think I was really interested in anything else. But from the statistics, you can see that the acceptance rate for biological sciences was about 41%. And all majors was 41%. So there's some that were doing much better, like the humanities and math majors that were getting acceptance rates of 47%. So you really major in anything you want. You'll still have to take the same prerequisite classes. So it doesn't really matter. So where to start? I think, a lot of times I remember being in that position myself. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you get more involved? How do you learn more about the hospital, as you see here in this photo? And I think the big thing is first looking for clinical opportunities. You're going into a career that involves being in a hospital and being in a clinic setting. So it's really good to understand what that's like and what it feels like. And they want to know, admissions committees want to know that you know what it's like to treat patients and to be around patients. And one way you do that is through shadowing, and another way is volunteering. So a point of emphasis here, a lot of times students will choose to do a lot of shadowing or a lot of volunteering, maybe not both. I think it's good to start with shadowing and then move on to volunteering. So what I mean by that is shadowing is a passive activity. When you're shadowing, you're legitimately, what it says, right? You are a shadow. You're following someone and you're just watching them, just like, a fly on the wall. So it's a very passive activity. You really don't have opportunities to engage with patients, to really learn or help out in the hospital. You're just watching to see if maybe this is a career for me. Maybe I like this, maybe I don't. So for all of you deciding, like, maybe it's med school, maybe it's not, I recommend finding opportunities to shadow, local hospital, mentors in the area, different clubs that have opportunities, so you can just see what's available. So maybe it's doctorate, maybe it's pharmacy, maybe it's a PhD, whatever it is, just shadow and watch them. It only takes a couple of days for you to realize, can I see myself doing this? Yes or no. And once you decide that, you really like what the doctors do and you want to go into medical school, then you can go ahead and start volunteering. This is a more active activity, helping patients get to their rooms, helping wipe down beds at the hospital, holding the door open for patients, volunteering to hand out flyers in the hospital, serve food, serve lunches. That's what gives you an opportunity to say that I had an ability to help someone else, to help a patient, even though I'm not a doctor yet. I want to be a doctor. I know that I can help out even in a small way, like helping a patient get more blankets in their bedroom or getting them supplies in the hospital, something like that. So that's the clinical side. Unfortunately, you're not really going to have a great shot at applying to medical school if you've never done anything clinical, because they want to know that you're devoted and have a demonstrated interest in the field. The next part is exploring different experiences that make you unique. So don't just do things for the resume, and don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. So, go to your local club, go to your local homeless shelter, go find unique opportunities, volunteer for a marathon, or go travel to a different country and help them with something there, like teaching English classes or something. There are a lot of unique opportunities that can make you stand out, and it doesn't have to be something as boring as joining some random club that you think will look good and being on the executive board or something. So I went to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I spent a month there in college. Got to volunteer and teach English classes in the favelas, so some of the slums in Brazil, very impoverished area. And even though that's not directly related to medicine, I didn't really, help anyone that was sick. I really got to see what it was like to help someone that was struggling in a different situation with poverty and with, poor housing circumstances. And I really talked about that in my personal statement about being able to help people when they're in their most vulnerable position, which I think that is a very noble calling and something that doctors have the opportunity to do. So that's just one example. Finally, research, what is it? It's essentially what we were talking about earlier, right? Like finding a cure to Alzheimer's disease or researching a specific topic. So research is something that's a sort of a hot topic, especially over the last 10, 15, 20 years, and is becoming more and more of a requirement to get into medical school and get into good residencies later on. And it's because they want you to be able to have the skill of thinking about a question and finding the information or developing a way of figuring out how something is the way that it is. So, it's something you have to be diligent about. And I think that if you allow the research to go in line with what you're naturally interested in and what you're curious about, I think it'll be really helpful for you. And it doesn't have to be as boring as people make it out to be. So just remember, Rome wasn't built in one day. It takes a lot of time and dedication. But I did all my research in orthopedic surgery, which is something I'm interested in because I grew up playing sports. So basically, I got to research topics that were interesting to me. Why do female athletes playing soccer get more ACL tears than male athletes? And looking into the anatomy of the ACL or how females are pivoting or moving on the field compared to men. So something like that is clearly something that's interesting to me, and it's related to orthopedic surgery, and you can publish a paper, present a poster on that, and it shows that you're interested in the field of orthopedics or the field of medicine as a whole. So that's research, and it's really important. So research, clinical experiences, and some unique experiences, those are all things that you can start thinking about early on as you prepare your application and get ready for applying to medical school. So I did film a YouTube video about, my entire pre-med schedule, what I took in college and sort of how I prepared to get into medical school. So this is the thumbnail for it, and you are welcome to check it out later on YouTube, and I'll provide the link for that. So talking about some unique study strategies, I know this won't be super relevant maybe at this time for some people, but maybe for some of you, you're thinking about different testing strategies or MCATs coming up. So I'll kind of briefly go over this slide. But before I get there, Zayed, do you have a quick question about one of the slides I just went through? All right, go ahead and answer if you have it. Yeah, go ahead.
So,
Yeah.
hi. I would ask a question, which is I have heard that being enrolled in a medical school needs from you to get a 3 years bachelor of general science. Is that right or no?
Yeah, great question. So you will need a bachelor's degree to apply to medical school. The major does not matter. You can go to bachelor and finish in 4 years or 3 years, depending on how many credits you have and how fast you go. Normally, though, it does take 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, and that is a requirement before medical school.
Do you think it will disappear in the future?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that question. Go one more time, please. All right. Well, if anyone has their, go ahead.
Do you think that the medical will disappear in the future because the applications of 5G applications?
I don't think I'm fully understanding your question. I'm sorry. Do I think that the medical process will change in the future? Was that what you were asking?
Will disappear.
He means that the doctors will not be like need for doctors anymore because of Chat GPT and things like that.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Yeah, great question. Yeah, Chat GPT has been crushing our board exams and all of that with its AI and all the machine learning. But I think we're very far away from, having fully, AI and machine run surgeries and treating of patients. I think there'll always be the need for doctors to think about the patient, because at the end of the day, the Chat GPT can't see and look into a patient. It's hard for them to know if a patient has social issues of, can they get the medication? Do they live near an area to, have more of a healthy lifestyle? There's so many different factors. And at the end of the day, you're not just treating a disease, you're treating the patient that's in front of you, right? And I think that looking at that person eye to eye, human to human, I think that connection, that patient interaction will not really go away. And I don't think that Chat GPT or anything like that will fully replace doctors. I think it will just assist us in helping make our jobs and lives a lot easier. So if that program can document all my notes and all the patients that I see, I think that would be very helpful. All right, I'm going to go ahead and continue to move forward. Yeah, go ahead.
But it's an easy process to know what you have.
Yeah, I think it's a great triage tool, and I'm sure it could be implemented for people to decide, like, based on your symptoms, do you need to see a doctor or not? But I think doctors will always be needed for higher level care and all of that. So that's kind of my take on it. But of course, it's very new, and we'll see sort of what happens. But I think we have to also remember that the medical field is always slow to change. Even though new technologies come out, it takes years and years before it becomes a new precedent, right? Because you need research to prove that this method is better than another method, and that takes a lot of time to prove something. So I think we're a long way away from that.
So why is it hard to?
I think we can move on for the time being.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, this might be more of a quick slide, but I'm going to quickly just talk about some study strategies. And so talking about college is more, independent, more exam, more quiz heavy. Medical school is going to be more independent. So once you get there, it's important for you to have a good schedule, a good plan, and a work-life balance. All of this is to say this program here, this photo, is something called Anki. It's a spaced repetition tool, and it allows you to keep a lot of information in your brain, which is what you're going to be doing when you're learning about the human body and all the medical sciences that go behind pathology, physiology, and all of that stuff. So having a good study system is really important. So this is something I would recommend to people studying for the MCAT. There's a deck called the Miles Down deck that's very popular. It pretty much puts all the information you need to know for the MCAT into flashcards. They're online flashcards that allow you to actively learn, engage with the material. And I think it's a great way to learn because it gets you ready for medical school, because a lot of students nowadays, when you take your medical board exams, they use Anki to remember all the information. So it's a great study tool and something that I recommend all students to get an idea of and how to use that. So. All right, so setting up Anki, I've made plenty of videos on YouTube about how to improve your MCAT scores, how to do well on your board exams, how to set up Anki and all its settings. So definitely check those videos out if you're interested in learning how to use this flashcard system. And of course, there's full disclosure, I'm not getting paid by Anki or anything like that. So it's something that I use every single day and I recommend to all students. So it's just something that I found helpful and I like to share with people. So as I mentioned before, advice and tips, be open, explore different options. There's so many healthcare opportunities. There's a lot of costs and benefits to going into medicine. It's a long road, so make sure it's the right one for you. And once you decide on that through shadowing, like we mentioned earlier, make sure you start early. A lot of things take time. So meeting with advisors, getting your schedules in line, doing pre-med advising, doing research, and making sure you take all the necessary steps. I think that would be very important for you to get an early start. So when it comes to the application process, just remember that there are a lot of different resources, but I filmed a ton of videos on how to write good personal statements, how to get your activities, most meaningfuls ready, secondary essays, letter of recommendations, and all of that. So when that time comes for all of you, definitely check out my channel or reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. So overall, I want to be brief. I want to say that I would like to stay connected. So if any of y'all have further questions after this session, I have a Facebook group with over 1,300 members that I actively respond to everyone, answer everyone's questions. I have my YouTube channel. The link is here. It's 3,900 subscribers at the moment. So, continuing to grow that community so I can help more and more people. And so that's just information for all of you. I'll leave that up here and I'll put it in the chat as well. And I think that would be the end of my presentation. So I want to keep it open-ended and answer questions for the next half hour or so. So if anyone has questions, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll get to it.
So can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like you said that we can volunteer. So I'm just a high school student. How do I convince them?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different opportunities, even as a high school student, going to your local hospital and asking, are there any volunteer opportunities? And a lot of times there's a brief application, but they allow you to just get involved in the hospital. So a lot of times it's checking in patients, helping them get their bags checked in, getting to the right room. And as you get more involved in that, you get more graduated autonomy, more responsibility. And I think it's a great way for you to help patients in that way. Hospitals always need help. So even if you're just in high school, I think they'll have enough trust for you.
Thank you. I'll definitely try.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What the best medical college in the world?
What was that question?
She said, what is the best medical college in the world?
Oh, wow. Great question. So I think that if you look at something like called US News, right, there's a lot of different data and statistics that go into the research and why one place is better for another. Maybe this is a cop-out answer, but I think the best medical college is the one that's the best fit for you. So of course you can read like Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Yale, the big names, Stanford, right? Like they're sort of known as like the best medical colleges in the US. But at the end of the day, right, if I don't want to live in California or New York, or I don't have any family or support there, I'm not going to do very well in medical school, right? So it depends on what's the best fit for you. At the end of the day, everyone's learning medicine. You're getting the same degree as anyone else that's going to a different medical school. And so I think there are a lot of different opportunities. So that's sort of my answer to that.
I want to ask you 3 questions. The first one, I want to study the genes deeply because I want to find treatment for cancer disease. So what's the suitable university for me or college?
Yeah, so usually for something like that, you would go, at least in the United States, you would go to college, get a bachelor's degree, and then go into a PhD, so like a postdoctorate degree, specifically in cancer research. That would be one way.
Okay, can you suggest me a website? Okay.
Sorry, just for time's sake, if we could keep it to 1 question per person and also go in the list of people that have their hands up, that would be great. So I'm not sure if Rauda, you've already asked your question, but if you haven't, you're more than welcome to now.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's nice to meet you. So I just wanted to ask a quick question. As someone who's looking into being a naval nurse in the military, do you have any information based off of that career path?
Naval nursing. So unfortunately, I would not probably be the best person to answer that question, just because I don't know or had any experience with the Navy or nursing specifically. So sorry about that.
Okay, next question is from Amina.
Hi, so I wanted to ask, so you said that we can, when we go to college, we can major in, let's say, chemistry or biology or like a specific subject. But when I was thinking about like doing my bachelor's, I was thinking that I go into a college and where I can do a program on nursing, let's say, and after 4 years, while I get my bachelor degree, I will also get my nursing degree, right? And then I take my MCAT to go to med school. So when I go to med school, I can work as a nurse. Do you think that would be a good idea?
Oh yeah, that's a good thought. So you definitely could major in nursing, but I actually have never seen that done, just typically because once you go to medical school, it's really hard to work. Even as with nursing, I know there's different schedules where they work maybe 3 days a week for 12-hour shifts. There's just a lot of required classes, and especially once you're a medical student in your third or fourth years, those are the clerkship years, you'll be working the same amount of hours pretty much as some of the residents. So you'll be working the same time as a resident in internal medicine and then general surgery. So you're going to be in the hospital 6 days a week and only 1 day off. It would be nearly impossible, I think, to work another full career like nursing while you're also doing that. So I think your best bet would probably be to major in biology or chemistry instead of doing the Bachelor's of Science in nursing. Probably just major in something related to medicine and then take the MCAT and apply to medical school. You're welcome to do nursing and then work a few years in between, like a gap year, then take the MCAT and apply to medical school. But I think it would be really hard to work and go to medical school at the same time.
Awesome. I think the next question is from Rahma, if I'm not mispronouncing that.
Okay, I want to ask you, can you suggest me a trusted website for finding research about genes?
Can you go outside of trusted websites to look for research about different genes? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what you mean by trusted websites, but if you're talking about maybe like, looking at PubMed or secure sort of like, well vetted out research sites for looking at different information about gene therapy and things like that, I would always sort of trust that higher level evidence, meaning things that have been peer reviewed, published in reputable journals and on PubMed. So I would probably recommend that in terms of what I would consider a trusted site instead of just a random blog or something.
Awesome, thank you. We'll move on to Ayat's question. And also, if I am saying your name and I mispronounce it, please feel free to correct me because I don't want to mispronounce anyone's names. But Ayat is next.
My name is Sid Rahma. Sah, true.
Sorry?
Can I ask questions?
I can hear you. I don't know what your question is. I'm sorry.
If you wanted to study medicine abroad, do you have to take the TOEFL or IELTS exam or no?
So if you study abroad, there's a lot of different requirements depending on where you're studying. So whether that's the Caribbean or in Europe or in the Middle East, wherever, it would all depend on the requirements at that school. Sometimes they require an MCAT score. Other times it's just some type of standardized exam or just a certain amount of classes taken in an undergraduate or bachelor's degree, but it really all depends. So medical schools, at least in the Caribbean that I'm more familiar with, like Ross, Saba, they all require you to have a bachelor's degree still and an MCAT score.
Awesome, thank you. I think our next question is from Badr.
Yes, why is it hard to apply to a medical school abroad?
Is it difficult? I would say it's less competitive than applying to medical school in the United States, but I'm sure it's still relatively competitive. I know that a lot of students can get admitted more easily, but you have to also keep in mind sometimes the international programs accept a lot of students knowing that a good number might not make it or they'll fail out. So you have to be careful and make sure that you go in with the right mindset and know all the rules and regulations of the country you're going to be learning medicine in and getting a medical degree from. So just making sure you look really closely into it, because to my understanding, some of the medical schools abroad could be somewhat less regulated than the system that's in the United States.
Awesome. Our next question is from Sarah.
Hi, I want to ask a question. How do we answer the why do you want to become a doctor in medical interviews? Because like it always comes with a second question, like why would it be a nurse or some other healthcare worker?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're already on top of it. They're going to ask you why you want to be a doctor. And sometimes they throw that curveball at you, like, why not nursing or why not be a PA, right? I think the biggest difference between a physician and a nurse is the fact that the doctor sort of makes that final decision and is the person that comes up with the diagnosis and decides that, I think, in my medical opinion, this patient has XYZ and the best treatment option will be this. Of course, I think you always preface it that medicine is a team. A doctor by himself cannot treat a hospital of patients. You know, you need nursing, you need staff, you need a physician's assistant, you need help, right? So everyone's working together, and it's not that the doctor has a more superior or better role than the nurse, but the role is just different. And I think that difference comes in the fact that the doctor is involved in diagnosing and coming up with an answer to the problem. And I think that I'm better suited for that because of my experiences, you know, working as a leader, working in this and that. So I think that's the approach I would recommend.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is from Miriam.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about, like, building up on the same question, why would you go into like be a medical doctor? So I know that I'm interested in neuroscience and I want to go into like maybe neurosurgery or neurology. Would that be a good reason to answer that question? Like, would that be a good answer, or would they need more general one, like, oh, I just want to treat patients, I want to be like a leader in the field, or such answers?
Yeah, no, that's an amazing question. I think sometimes it's hard because at that point you're trying to just be like, I want to be a doctor, right? I want to get into medical school. It's sort of tough because if you say like, oh, I want to go into neurosurgery, it's sort of assuming like, oh, I'm already going to get into medical school and then I'm going to do this. But I don't think it's a bad answer if you have a good reason. So for example, if you have a lot of research in neurosurgery or you have a specific story about why you want to be a neurosurgeon, I think that really helps because medical school would be a stepping stone and a one step in the right direction towards your dream. So you can sort of phrase it as that, you know, I've had this experience, which have led me to really want to help patients in the capacity of being a neurosurgeon. And I know that to be a neurosurgeon, I need to go to medical school to learn about the hospital system, how to be a doctor, how to treat patients. And that would get me one step closer to my goal and then explain the reasons why you want to be a physician. So if you can make it more about you and stand out in that way, I would recommend that, honestly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. Our next question is from Zeneb.
Hi. First, I wanna thank you for this great session. It was very useful, and I I enjoyed it very much. My question is like, can we learn that the connection between technology and the medicine, like the always depending on technology? But I'm not talking about like the chat GPT. I'm talking about like using medicine by technology, like to change the genes of a person and to make him better. So can we do that using technology or not? Like the biotechnology?
Yeah, I apologize. I think your audio was cutting out a little bit, so I didn't fully get to hear your question. Sorry. If you would like to type it out in the chat box or try again, we could try that.
Yeah, like, I was talking about like how can we use the technology with the medicine, but I'm not talking about the chat GPT. I'm talking about like how to change the genes of a person using technology, like electronics or something like that. So where can I learn something like that?
Yeah, so it sounds to me like from what I heard is that you're talking a lot about like biomedical engineering. So using technology to develop different devices to help in the medical field and help treat patients. So that would be more biomedical technologies. And so it could be done through engineering, could be done through a biomedical engineering degree. So BioE is what it's sometimes referred to in abbreviation. So that's like coming up with different implants for total knee replacements, coming up with technology on how to have a better image of the heart or the lungs and things like that. So that sounds like it could be a great option as well.
Awesome. Our next question is from Fatma.
I wanted to ask, is there a special field for studying cancer diseases related to the brain and nervous only, or is there a field for studying the brain and nervous and linking it to the field of psychology?
What was the question? If you can go into medicine with a major in psychology, or I think I only heard the last part.
Yes, I said, is there a field for studying the brain and nervous and linking it to the field of psychology?
Yeah, absolutely. So neurology is a field, and also psychiatry, which would be directly related to psychology and the treatment of different mental illness disorders. And the neurology would be like the nerves, like you mentioned, and different disorders related to the nervous system. Absolutely.
Awesome. Our next question is from Ahmed.
Hello.
Go on.
One of you can go.
Okay, how can I choose the best college for me?
Yeah, great question. So the best college for you would depend on a lot of different reasons. So for me, I chose to go to my public college in the state that I grew up in because of in-state tuition. So it'd be more expensive for me to go out of state. So that was a big decision for me. I knew that I was going to go to medical school, or at least I wanted to, which would be pretty expensive. So that is why I chose to stay in my in-state program. I don't think it matters where you go to college. Of course, that all depends on where you're location wise and what you're interested in, but most colleges will have the medicine majors that you need or whatever classes you need to apply to medical school. So as long as it's a good fit for you, I think then that would make it the best college.
Okay, what's the factor that makes the college is the best?
Well, one more time, sorry.
What is the factors that make the college is the best?
The factors that make the college what?
Is the best for me.
Oh, the best for you? The factors that make it the best? I think the factors that make it the best would probably be location, cost, the type of opportunities there. So seeing if they maybe have a strong pre-med organization, any nearby hospitals, and then maybe if you have like friends or family nearby. Those are things that I think would be important, at least to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna ask some questions from people that have messaged me in the chat now, and then we can go back to people that have their hands raised. So somebody asks, I'm just trying to find the question. So someone's asking if they have a specific idea to treat a specific disease, how should they approach that, or what fields would be good for that kind of question?
Yeah, I think this was similar to a question we had earlier. I would say probably going into a research heavy field, since it's very specific to a disease you want to cure or something you want to find out more information about. So PhD would probably be good.
Awesome. Someone else asks, what made you want to specialize in ortho? And is there another like specific subspecialization that you want to focus on?
Yeah, great question. So I wanted to go into orthopedics just because it's a very rewarding field. In orthopedics, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what I mean by that is when someone tears their ACL or tears their rotator cuff or fractures the femur in their leg, there's a first encounter where you see the injury, you fix the problem, you go and operate, you fix the broken bone, and then you see them recover through physical therapy, regain their strength. And then at the end, you get them back to hopefully doing all the things they love to do. They're very happy, and you can close the loop on that patient and send them off. They never have to see you again, and you got to fix their problem. I think a lot of times in medicine, there are certain diseases that it's very hard to fix. So orthopedics is very rewarding in that way. You get to actually see the fruits of your labor. And also I'm very hands-on, so I really liked surgery. There are a lot of different subspecialties in orthopedics: sports medicine, foot and ankle, hip and knee, shoulder, elbow, hand, and spine. And I think that I probably like spine surgery the most because I find the anatomy very interesting.
Awesome.
Do you think that it's easy to get a scholarship from STEM schools in Egypt to a medical college?
So I might not be the best person for that, since I personally don't have that experience, and I don't know anyone specifically that has gone from Egypt to study in the United States, but I know other friends that have been international students that have gone to college and medical school here in the United States. So I think that just being specifically from Egypt might not make much of a difference, since in admissions you're considered, one of the international applicants. And I know that there's a certain percentage of international applicants that are accepted each year to college in the US as well as medical school. But it could be difficult at times with visas and things like that when you're applying for H-1Bs and stuff after you graduate. So those are all things that you'd want to keep in mind.
Okay, our next question from the chat is, so someone's asking kind of a specific question about, after they do a PhD in oncology, do they have the ability to treat patients like cancer patients, or is that someone else's responsibility?
Yeah, great question. So the oncologist, which would be someone that went to medical school and has an MD or DO, they would be the ones that would directly treat the patients. The PhD would be more involved in developing the gene therapy or the medication or the use, whatever it is, to actually treat the patient, but they wouldn't be the ones treating the patients directly, typically.
Awesome. Okay, we'll go back to people that have their hands raised now. I think our next person up is Mohammed with last name starting with E.
Okay, I have two questions. The first question, what are the specific steps to make a good CV and to apply for a good scholarship for medicine?
Yeah. So I feel like the necessary steps are some of what we talked about earlier. So making sure you're well-rounded, working hard, finding unique experiences that will make you stand out. And I talked about briefly the one where I went to Brazil. So I think those are early steps that you can take. And then of course your CV will include other research opportunities, volunteering opportunities, GPA, MCAT. And I think those are all the typical things that are looked at. Of course, with scholarships, you'll have personal scholarship essays that you can work on and really show more of your character through that. So those are just a couple of things I think that are important.
Okay, the second question, if I volunteered in a charity or for community work, does that makes my CV, does that make my CV stronger?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely, especially if you have a strong story, you can talk about the experience and something that was very positive in impacting others and or yourself and a lot of personal growth. I think it's a great opportunity. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Our next question is from Malak, last name starting with H. Okay, we'll move on to Ilyas.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. I just wanna inform you that I'm volunteer and lifeguard with the Moroccan Red Crescent, and I just want to ask you, do you recommend me to do an internship in my local hospital, even if I am a high schooler?
Yeah, I think even if you're a high schooler, there's a lot of opportunities to learn, and it can be something that you maybe do once a week or once a month, and you continue it even in college if possible. So you build relationships, get good letters of recommendation, and it shows early interest in a field. So if there are opportunities and if you have time, I would definitely get involved.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, our next question is from Salma.
Okay, hello. I'm just asking about the ratio that the scholarship accepted the international students for the medical schools, and also what are the scores that equivalent to the GPA?
Yeah. So I don't know off the top of my head specifically. I know that typically scholarships are far and few, unfortunately, in medical school because it's so expensive and there are a lot of competitive applicants. Usually I would say maybe 5 to 10% of a class, maybe less than that, have any form of scholarship. So I didn't personally have any form of scholarship for medical school. And then in terms of MCAT and GPA, I would imagine that those students would have to have very competitive scores. Typically in medical school, the scholarships are more merit-based, and so there's not really a need-based component that goes into it.
All right, I'll ask our next question from somebody in the chat. So someone's asking about the field of forensic medicine. So they're asking what kind of career opportunities there are. Do you think it's a good career in general?
Sorry, one more time. My bad. I also have some messages in the chat, so I was trying to read them for a second, which I can answer quickly after I answer this question.
Yeah, so this person was just asking about like career opportunities in the field of forensic medicine. Like, do you think it's a good career or a sustainable one?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so at least from my limited experience in forensic medicine, being able to determine, in cases and, using medicine to kind of figure things out. I think it's an interesting career. I don't know too much about it though, unfortunately. But at least what I've seen on TV and stuff, it seems interesting. Sorry. And then quickly going through my direct message box here. I heard that there are no fully funded scholarships for medical schools. Is that true? That is not true. They are very rare, but there are some programs that do offer full rides. I have a few friends that had got some full rides at my medical school. YouTube channel, let me put that, everyone, I'm sure it's available. How to get the perfect MCAT score. That is a pretty tough feat. I don't know if anybody's ever gotten a 528, but anything over 520 is considered in like the top 1 percentile. So using programs like Anki, like I mentioned, would be really helpful in getting an early start to studying. But of course, you don't need to get a 520 plus to get into medical school. Next question is, after doing a PhD in oncology, would you still have to do a residency or something like that to be able to treat patients? I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. Unfortunately, since they're different degrees, after a PhD in oncology, there would not be a residency option to treat patients. Typically, you'd probably go back to medical school if you want to be treating patients in a physician role, or going to some other specialty where you can assist treating patients, but not being the primary doctor. However, from what I'm seeing in your question, there are programs that are called MD PhD programs. So they're 8 years long, and you'll get both your MD and your PhD. And that way you can do research in oncology as well as treat patients, which is definitely something that I have friends that are doing. And there are a lot of MD PhD opportunities, joint programs that exist.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for questions for Austin today, but I know that there are still a ton of questions in the chat and a lot of people have their hands raised. So what we'll be doing is we'll be sharing Austin's PowerPoint at the end of the session. And like he mentioned, he has a Facebook group there where he answers questions from people. So you're more than welcome to join that. And if your question was still unanswered today, you're more than welcome to post a question there, and Austin will get back to you when he can. But for right now, since we're not in person and we can't give Austin a physical round of applause, something we like to do is give our guest speakers a virtual round of applause, which is just a reaction on Zoom. So if you'd be able to do that, that would be great. So we can show Austin that we really appreciate him coming out to come and talk to us today and to share his journey and his advice about pursuing a career in medicine. That would be awesome. But for right now, we'll let Austin go. Thank you so much again for coming out to talk to us about your career in medicine. We'll be able to post your slides later so we can reach out to you. And thank you once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Davina. I appreciate it. Best of luck to everyone. Thanks for joining the MedStem Powered Boot Camp. It's a great opportunity to get early involved and continue to stay in touch. Thanks for everyone for listening. Thanks for all the great questions. I had an amazing time talking to all of you. So enjoy the rest of your session, and happy to be involved here. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now we'll move into our CPR segment. So I had some questions in the chat asking me about how attendance is recorded. So for each of our sessions, this is our first one of 3, we'll have an hour where that's dedicated to our guest speaker, and then an hour where we will be going through a workshop and interactive, talking through things that are specific to MedStem Powered and not guest speakers. So our attendance is automatically logged through Zoom. So if you're able to join Zoom with your full name that you use to register for the program, it makes it a lot easier for us when we're going through to, calculate your attendance and make sure we have you down so we can get you your certificates. But for right now, what I can do is I've put our CPR slides that I'm going to be walking through with you all in our Google Drive, but I'll also send it in the chat now, just in case you haven't had a chance to go and find it. And I'll also enable some chat permissions again so you can talk, but I'll put everything there and then I'll put my slides in as well so you can follow along. Another great opportunity we have here that also increases our accessibility is that we have student note takers. So if you're able to annotate the notes throughout the session or take your own notes and submit them to us, you'll get volunteer hours, and then we can also send those notes out to other people that might need them if they're not able to make a session or something like that. Are there any questions before I start my workshop?
I'm sorry, but can you talk more slowly, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for reminding me. I'll make an effort
Thanks.
to talk more slowly. And if at any point I start to speed up, please feel free to message me in the chat and be like, please slow down. Yeah, so someone asks, where do we send the notes that you're taking? The form isn't active yet, but we'll make sure that all of the materials are sent to you. So you can just like click on the Google form, upload a link of your notes, and then send it there. Okay. I had a lot of people asking me if we were finished after Austin's segment. No, that's just the halfway point. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Again, if you have any questions, I'll be asking questions throughout my PowerPoint as well, throughout the workshop. If you want to answer them, you're more than welcome to raise your hand on Zoom. You can also type it in the chat if that's more comfortable. But yeah, I'll go ahead and get started with that. Do people have questions whose hands are raised right now? Eldoc, Mohammed, or Edda? Okay. I'm gonna lower your hands so that way if people want to participate during the workshop, I don't get confused. But I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so like I said earlier, welcome to our second annual winter camp. If you're on our Slack, I've hopefully been in contact with you either by sending you a welcome message or just introducing you to some people that we have here, but we're really excited to be launching our second annual winter camp this year. We're really excited to meet all of you. There are a ton of new people that we haven't seen in our programs before, and so we're really excited to get to know all of you throughout the course of the camp. All right, so you can respond to this question in the chat just by typing a number, but how are you feeling today? Which dog represents you? Okay, there's a good variety. One, a lot of people are saying one. I agree, one looks very snuggly. I see some 4s, some 9s. I do see some 8s. I am so sorry, 8 is a little bit more concerning. 7, 7, 4, 6, some 5s. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for participating. Alrighty, I will move on to the actual workshop. Okay, so our workshop today is going to be really covering some emergency first aid and CPRC techniques. So here's some background information about the levels of first aid certification. Sometimes people think that in order to perform CPR on someone, you have to be certified. That is true in some cases, but civilians are allowed to perform, at least to some extent, CPR. You can get certified as a level A CPR. You can get certified in CPR level C, which includes more emergent scenarios. And then you can also get certified in BLS, which is basic life support. Okay, so CPRA is really just offered to people that want to learn about the basics of CPR, like civilians, people that have young children, people that work in schools, people that attend schools, because you're surrounded by a lot of people on a regular basis. So it covers choking procedures. This is really important, especially for teachers that have younger or smaller children. choking procedures are really important, especially if you're in charge of small children, because it can be a lot more scary than perhaps they are in adults. Not that they aren't scary, but it covers what to do when adults or children are choking, defibrillation, and then also treating emergencies. So CPR-B, like I mentioned earlier, CPR is really important when you're thinking about choking in children. So CPR-B is specifically for children. So if you're working in childcare, it also covers Heart Saver CPR AED for infants and children, and you can add this onto your CPRA. So this is also really good for people that are teachers or are working with young individuals. All right, and then we have CPRC. So CPRC covers everything from infants to adults. It also includes 2 rescue skills. It includes standard first aid, and it also covers urgent assistance to injured or ill adults, infants, and children. Okay, I'm going to pause for a sec to see if people have questions. Mena? Okay, Mohammed?
I think what is the middle divided.
Sorry, my internet connection is low.
No worries. No worries, no worries. You can type your question if that's easier.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask, what is the importance of CPR? What would that help me in medical school?
Absolutely, yeah. So CPR is an incredibly important skill to have, especially if you're applying to medical school, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of the phrase, is there a doctor anywhere, right? If there's an emergent scene, right? Because if you're asking for a doctor, it's because usually someone is unconscious, maybe they're not breathing, you're asking for a doctor because they might know what to do. CPR is really important if you arrive to an emergency and you find that there are people that are choking and unable to breathe. If you find that there are people that are not breathing, perhaps they don't have a pulse. So this is really important for medical school, and it's also really just a good skill to have in daily life.
Thank you.
No worries. Mohammed or Mohamed, any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What is the criteria of CPR divided score?
Sorry, what is the criteria for CPR what?
Divided score.
CPRA?
Yes.
Yeah, so for CPRA, it's kind of just the most basic form of CPR that we have. So it's talking about, what do you do if there's an adult here? How do you perform your compressions? How do you deliver rescue breaths? For babies and infants, that becomes a little bit more complex because there are different rules there. So that's why that one becomes a little bit more specialized, but CPRA is just kind of your basic CPR.
CPRA is specialized for adults only?
Yeah, it is for adults only.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. Okay, I'm going to take 2 more questions and then I'll move on. Edda?
Yeah, so I want to ask, how do I apply to this school and what's condition for applying to it?
To take a CPR class or to apply to medical school?
How do I apply to this school and what's the condition for applying to it?
Sorry, what school are you talking about applying to? I might just not be hearing well.
How do I apply to this school?
Oh, to take a CPR class? So usually this also depends where you live, but Red Cross associations will host like workshops in schools, like in the high schools. You can just Google also CPR classes near me, and usually you're in a small group of 10 to 15 people, and then you run through a whole day of, doing some practice scenarios, you learn some content, and then you take an assessment, and then they'll email you a certificate out. But it's usually only a 1-day procedure. It depends on how specialized you're going. But I think a quick Google search might help, just depending on your area.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Ala?
How many types of CPR?
How many types of CPR? So we have CPR A, B, and C?
Thanks.
No worries. Shema?
Yes. First, thank you for this wonderful session. And my question is, I'm just wondering, how long would it take me to master CPRC?
So I did a CPRC workshop about 2 years ago, and that certification lasts for 3 years. I would say it takes a day to learn the content and then maybe a week or so to kind of practice it and really get it in there. It doesn't take too long.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Okay, I will take one more question and then I'm going to move on. Mohammed?
Hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you to give us this great chance to meet kind people like you.
Oh, that's very
And
sweet.
I want to ask, is there a certificate after this session?
Yeah, so you'll get a certificate after the 3rd session of the program. So you get a program certificate of completion. Okay?
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so I'm gonna pause on questions for now, and then once we have a bit more time later, then I'll come back and answer some of your remaining questions. Okay, so what are the 3 C's in CPR assistance? It's check, call, and care. So in your first step, what you're checking is the scene. If you arrive to the scene of an emergency, you have to check it and make sure it's safe for you to approach. Then you check the area, make sure there's nothing like glass, open wires, fire, anything like that, anything that might cause you harm. And then once those 2 have been checked and deemed okay, then you check your patient. Mayar, do you have a question?
Yeah, what are the difference between types of CPR?
So certain types of CPR, like CPR-A, only for adults. B and C, they also deal with children. And C gets a little bit more intense. Okay, Mohammed?
I'm asking for is there a form for the attendance or it's automatically from the Zoom?
It's automatically done. Also, if anybody else has any questions about like program logistics, like attendance, Google Forms, etc., you're more than welcome to message me on Slack, but we'll try to keep questions right now for just this workshop. Thank you. Okay, moving on. So first we have arriving at the scene. So what you're going to do is check the scene in the area. Like I mentioned earlier, you have to make sure there's no fire, gas, glass, or wires. Some people might think that if you see someone that is perhaps unconscious, they're passed out, they don't seem to be responsive, your job is to go and attend to them. That's not the case. You have to make sure the scene and the area are safe for you to proceed. So take 1 to 3 seconds, see if there's anybody there. Don't touch anything that might be dangerous, like glass. If there are firearms, sharp objects, perpetrators, don't touch, don't engage. A really important thing to remember with CPR is that you come first before the patient, before the person that might need your help. Okay, so I'm just checking the chat to see if anyone is letting me know that I'm speaking a little fast. Okay, I think we are okay. Yeah, also a reminder to keep like your comments and messages in the chat like related to the program if possible. All right, so we're checking the area. Perhaps if you see a knife in your patient's chest, do not remove it, call 911, kind of stabilize the wound, ask the patient questions if they're semi-conscious. If you arrive to a scene and you see that there is perhaps a baby and someone that might look like their parent or their guardians, it's your job to check the baby first before you check the parents and guardians. All right, so we have 2 scenarios. So we've gone to our scene, we've made sure that it's safe for us to proceed, and then we've gone to the area. Okay, the area is safe, the patient doesn't have any sharp objects embedded in them, they're okay. Now we have 2 possible scenarios. Scenario 1, where a patient is conscious, and scenario 2, where a patient is unconscious. So in which of these scenarios do you think we might potentially need to perform CPR? You can go ahead and raise your hand. I don't know whose hands raised are new for this question, but Mazen?
Okay, for this part, I think it will be the unconscious patients.
Yeah, it would be for our unconscious patients. Good job.
If you could excuse me, I have a question for the previous slide.
Sure.
Yes, I was always wondering why this when somebody has been stabbed with a knife or any sharp stuff, why is removing it is not the best choice? Why shouldn't we do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you see that there's a knife embedded in somebody's chest, that knife might be embedded in them, which is obviously a problem. But if you remove it, what you could be doing is opening up their chest cavity to a ton of blood loss, right? If the knife is embedded there and they seem to be semi-conscious, it might be that the knife is actually preventing significant amounts of blood loss, right? If you remove it, then the blood might start to flow everywhere. They might start to lose it. They might go unconscious. So that's why if you see it there, it's actually better for it to remain in them and then to have professionals take it out, where they can remove it quickly, then close up the area, things like that.
Okay, if I can add on this, I see also in most scenes that when somebody's got shot with a bullet or something like this, they like round it up with anything like t-shirt or something to stop the blooding. So why is that always important for like it does not that increase the pain for the unconscious patient?
Yeah, that's definitely really important. You see t-shirts being used to kind of, tighten the area, because what that's doing is it's preventing blood from flowing to other areas of your body. You want all of that blood to stay where the injured area is, right? So because we want it to stay where it is, what we're doing when we're tying off those other areas is we're preventing the blood from leaving, because we don't want to have significant blood loss.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries. Okay, I'll take Salma and Ilyas, and then I'll move on.
No, thank you. I just know the answer of my question.
Okay, perfect. Ilyas?
I just want to ask you, so we are just like you are just informing us about CPR, not the first aid, actually, right?
So first aid and CPR, some of it goes hand in hand, but this is mostly about CPR. Okay.
Please, can you close the chat?
Sorry?
Sorry
to interrupt, Davina. Is it possible to close the chat?
Oh, yes. I will do that right now. Thank you. I'll change it so you can message hosts. Alrighty. Okay. So again, we've checked our scene, we've checked our area, and now we have two possible scenarios, either a conscious patient or an unconscious patient. Again, we're examining the scene, any sharp objects. We've gone through all of this. So if your patient is potentially conscious, then you can introduce yourself as one of the following. You could potentially be a first aid trainer, a first aid responder, or a civilian. And then you have to ask for their consent. If they are conscious, they're able to, open their eyes, talk, understand what you're saying. You have to ask for their consent. Say, can I help you? I am a civilian. I know a little bit about CPR, or I know a little bit about medical practices. Can I help you? If they say yes, you can proceed to help them. If they do not say yes, even if they seem to be in a very emergent scenario, you are not allowed to help them. You have to call 911 or whatever the emergency number equivalent is for you. All right, so let's say we've gotten to this scenario, our patient is conscious and they have said, yes, you can help me. Then if you start to help somebody, don't stop until EMS arrives, emergency medical services. If the person starts to breathe, so if they're unconscious and you're performing CPR and then they start to breathe, that's when you stop helping them. If you begin to feel tired, or if the scene becomes unsafe. So a quick question I have for you is, when you're arriving at the scene, who do you help first? You can raise your hand, you can type it in the chat, anything goes. Fozia?
Hi, so I have a question. So for the notes, do you need us to like write it on a Google Doc or Word, or like does it really matter? Does it not really matter?
It doesn't really matter. Also, we're gonna try to keep questions for like logistics for program stuff as maybe like a message to me on Slack or perhaps like at the end of the session, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. All right, Mohammed? Sorry? Sorry, I don't think I can hear you. I'm gonna move on to Mayar.
Yeah, I have a question. If any condition we can't do CPR.
There are some conditions where you can't do CPR, and we'll talk about those soon. Rowan or Rawan?
I was about to answer the question. I guess we should help children first, or yeah, children, not adults, because adults can save themselves, I guess.
Yeah, so the right answer is yes, you're right. We should help children first because children might present more emergent need. Awesome. Great job, everyone.
But I think that we have to help the people that need help that are serious situations. Maybe the children are not serious, but the adults are more serious. I
Well,
think
the
it's
Yeah, that's really a great point that you brought up. If the children's condition isn't that serious, all you have to do is go check in with them, make sure you know that their situation isn't that serious, and then you can move on to helping the adults. So I guess the really important thing is that you're checking in with the children first. All right, I'm gonna move on. Okay, so if your patient is conscious, you ask them the sample question. So sample is an acronym. So S stands for signs and symptoms. If they're up, they can talk to you, ask them, what are you feeling? Do you know what your blood pressure levels are? Sometimes they might not know that. You can ask them for A, their allergies, M for medication, P, their past medical history, like maybe they have a history of having strokes or heart attacks. L is last intake. Last intake means when is the last time you consumed food, water, a beverage, anything? And then E, events. What happened? What do you last remember? So these questions you can only ask if your patient is conscious. If they're unconscious, they cannot respond to you. The questions are kind of useless. All right, so now we're moving on to our second scenario. So we've already dealt with what happens if our patient is conscious. We ask them those questions. We know who we attend to first. We call 911 if they don't want our help. Now we're moving on to our unconscious patient scenario. So you call 911 too, and you operate under something called implied consent. You can't ask them if you're allowed to help them because they can't answer. So you're protected under the Good Samaritan law, which says that they were unconscious, you were just trying to help. Rowan, do you have a question?
Yes, sorry for interrupting. I wanted to ask if there's a situation that where two people and they are conscious, but okay, someone is really, really severe and I feel like I can present something. And the other one is something I'm familiar with, so I can perform. Do I choose the easier or the most dangerous?
So in a scenario like that, you do something called triage. So triage is assessing the severity of the patients that you have there. If you're triaging your patients, you would start with the most severe cases and then work your way up to the least severe cases. So it doesn't matter what your prior experience is, you always start with the most severe ones.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Razan and then Tasneem?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, like, when you talked about if someone is stabbed by a knife, you're not supposed to remove it because the blood will come out. Then how about if I was like stabbed with a knife and I'm on my own and heading to the hospital? Like when I'm moving, like doesn't the knife injure other cells in my body?
Well,
like, should I move it?
You shouldn't move it because if you call 911 and you're on the way to the hospital, someone else will help you stabilize the knife. The really big thing is you don't want to lose a ton of blood because then that makes your situation a lot more critical. So that's why we leave the knife in. Even if it was happening to you, leave it in.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Okay, I'll take Tasneem and then I'll move on.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
How should I do if there is a serve emergency and the patient is bleeding as there is nobody else except of me and I have a flat function? As the emergency will arrive after a long time, so how can I save this situation?
So as a civilian, you're allowed to help them. You're allowed to perform CPR. You're allowed to ask them all of these questions. So you can help them until they get there. Awesome. Okay. So for our unconscious patient scenario, you walk up to the patient and you make sure they're lying on their back. So their back is on the ground. You clap at both of their ears and tap them on their shoulders and ask, are you okay? Does anybody know why we tap on their shoulders if they're unconscious? What are we trying to do? Miriam?
Is to see how conscious or like can they feel people's touch.
Yeah, we're trying to get them to wake up if they could wake up. Sarah, do you have anything to add?
I'm not sure if that's related, but is it because the vagus nerve is kind of there and you're trying to like shock them back?
Yes, exactly. We're trying to stimulate their vagus nerve to see if that might help them become conscious again. Great job, everyone. Yeah, so we're going up to them, clapping at both of their ears, tapping them on their shoulder, which is close to where their vagus nerve is. All right. And then, yep, we're tapping on their shoulders to stimulate those muscle contractions because of the vagus nerve. Awesome job, everyone. Okay, so you walk up to the patient, you clap at their ears, tap them on their shoulders, ask if they're okay. If someone else is there, ask them to call 911. Ask another person to go grab an AED kit, which is a defibrillator. So then what you do is you go up to the patient and you place your ear by their nose and you look out at their chest. And what you're doing is you're checking the ABCs. A stands for airway. You want to make sure their airway is not obstructed. Is there something lodged in there? Because if you're performing CPR or performing rescue breaths, that might make the object that's already in them become more lodged, and that might lead to complete choking. You're checking for their breathing, so you can see if their chest is moving up and down. That might mean that means they're breathing. You can also listen for that too by their nose or their mouth. And then C, you're checking for circulation. Does anyone know where we might check for circulation? I'll also open the chat too. Gabriella?
You check their wrist for their pulse, and that shows you their circulation.
Yeah, exactly. You can check something called their radial pulse. You can also try it now and see if you can find yours. You can check their radial pulse. You can also check their carotid pulse, which is in your neck. Awesome. So you do this, you perform this assessment, and then you're looking for all of these things. All right, so this is our first unconscious patient scenario where they're unconscious, but they're breathing. So if they're unconscious but breathing, you put them in something called the recovery position, where you bend their knee and their elbow and you kind of roll them onto the side. Does anybody know why we roll them onto the side? Razan?
Yes, when you roll them on the side, if they throw up, it usually goes back to their lungs. So when you do that, it will just come out from the ground.
Yes, perfect. We want to roll them on their side because if in any circumstance they start to throw up, if we put them on their side, it'll go out instead of choking them. So that's really why we want to make sure they're on their side. Great job. All right. So now we have our unconscious and not breathing scenario. So in our unconscious and not breathing scenario, if you have this, use it. If you don't, it's okay. Gloves and a mask that you put over them. If you don't have it, again, it's okay. So for adults, you want to use compressions that are about 5 centimeters in depth. So what you're going to do for your compressions, again, the reason we're performing CPR if they're unconscious and not breathing is because we're trying to A, get them to breathe, and B, we're trying to push the remaining oxygenated blood out of their heart. So that way we can try to stimulate brain function, help keep them alive. So you interlock your hands like this, and then you straighten them out like this so that your elbows are kind of locked, and then you place it over their sternum. Your sternum, and you can look this up in like an anatomical diagram too, but it's kind of on the flat part of your chest, and then you perform compressions. So you can perform 30 compressions and then give 2 rescue breaths where you kind of just deliver a breath over their mouth and nose. Okay, I have a lot of questions. Asma? Or Mayar?
How do I know if the person is alive or dead?
So that's why we do our ABCs, right? We're checking for circulation, we're checking for breathing, we're checking for their airway. You won't really know if they're alive or dead. You just have to try compressions because you might not be able to see them breathing or feel their pulse, but you're going to try to do CPR so that you can see a pulse. And then your only job is to do this until EMS gets there. And when EMS gets there, they'll be able to tell for sure whether they are alive or not.
But so if the person is dead, I needn't to do CPR.
Yes,
Right?
you wouldn't be able to know that right off the bat. You'd just be able to tell that they're unconscious and not breathing. So you want to try to do CPR.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. That's a good question. All right, I'm going to move on for now, and then we can get back to some questions later. Okay, so for adults, you do 30 compressions to 2 rescue breaths. And then for children, it's a little bit different. For children, there isn't a standard height that you need or depth that you need to do the chest compressions for. It's just a third of their chest depth. And then again, it's still 30 compressions to 2 rescue breaths. For babies, it's different. You don't use your hands interlocked like this. You use 2 fingers over their sternum and you push down. And for adults, children, and babies, you want to make sure it's 100 to 120 compressions a minute. I know like a kind of popular song to do CPR to is Staying Alive. So try to do that. Again, this is what your compressions and your rescue breaths are looking like. You can see that your hands are kind of flattened out. You're kneeling over the person, delivering those compressions, and then the rescue breaths, you tilt their chin up a bit. All right, so you can try this now or you can try it later. You can grab a pillow or a doll of some kind, set that patient on the ground and pretend you've just arrived at the scene of an emergency, check your scene, walk up to the patient, clap on either side of their shoulders, clap at their ears, tap their shoulders, ask if they're okay, and then perform your compressions and such. So you can try this. All right, so some more emergency scenarios are partial versus complete choking. So does anyone know what the difference is between partial and complete choking? Again, it's totally okay if not. I'll also check the chat.
I believe partial choking is when there's something lodged in the airway.
Yeah,
And,
go ahead.
Sorry, and fully choking is when the airway is completely obstructed.
Yeah, exactly. That's the difference between partial and complete. If it's complete, that whatever is lodged in their throat is completely preventing them from being able to breathe. They can't cough, can't breathe. If it's partial, they're still able to choke. I'm sure most, if not everybody here, has experienced choking to some degree where something becomes slightly lodged and then you start to cough it up. Coughing is good. So if you see somebody that might be choking, ask, can I help you? If they're coughing, do not perform any Heimlich maneuvers or abdominal thrusts. Encourage them to keep coughing to prevent the item from becoming dislodged. However, if someone seems to be choking and they can't cough, they can't seem to breathe, then that's when you want to call 911 and then perform abdominal thrusts. So for complete choking, this is just a fun fact, a person can go a maximum of 2 to 3 minutes without breathing and then they become unconscious. So it's really important that you act fast if you notice that someone's completely choking. So in the image to the right, you can see that the woman has bent the patient that's completely choking forward slightly. You put their leg in front of theirs. She's not doing it in the image, but that's what you're supposed to do. Then you deliver 5 back blows with your palm in between their shoulder blades, and then 5 abdominal or chest thrusts. So your fist is wrapped around your thumb like this, and then you go up and in, right at their chest. So why might we need abdominal and chest thrust options? So your chest might be higher up, your abdominal region is more where your stomach is. Why do we need 2 options? What's the importance or significance of that? Daniel?
It pulls the carbon dioxide out of his body and makes the oxygen reach easily.
Yeah, so that's definitely a reason why we're doing this, is because we're trying to make sure they keep breathing. Daniel or Ala?
I have a question. What if there is an earthquake? What the first things should I do?
Sorry, do you mind repeating that? Do you mind repeating that?
Yeah.
What?
Do you mind repeating that?
Okay. What if there was an earthquake? And there is people who injured with this. What the first thing should I do?
So if they have some kind of external injury, like a scrape or a cut, and they're also completely choking, you treat them for complete choking first.
Okay.
All right, Daniel?
Yeah, also answering to your question, I'm just we would push upper in the abdominal area, because if something is stuck in the esophagus or the digestive canal, as well as pushing near the lungs and the chest would help. Something if something is stuck in the trachea or the respiration, there is at the respiration can the trachea would get out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so what we were looking for in this question, great input, thank you, is we really need an abdominal and a chest thrust option, because what if the person that is completely choking is pregnant? Or what if they're in a wheelchair? They're pregnant, we can't perform chest thrusts. We can't perform abdominal thrust. We would need a chest one so as not to harm the baby. And if they're in a wheelchair, abdominal chest ones would be easier as well. But great input, everybody. All right, yeah, and then special cases are wheelchair. Again, we need chest, but not abdominal. If you find that you yourself are completely choking, call 911 and leave the door open so that they can get in. And if you are in an open public space and perhaps you're in an apartment, a friend's apartment, and you start to completely choke, then you can pull the fire alarm. The fire department can tell where the fire alarm was pulled or which specific one, so they can come and find you. These are also helpful because what if you are completely choking and you're the only one there? And then choking is different in babies and children. You want to place your finger around their chin, tilt the baby's face down, and then do 5 back blows, and then do your chest thrust with 2 fingers. All right, so we'll talk about some other emergencies as well. So heart attacks happen when an artery that is supplying blood to your heart becomes blocked. Some symptoms might include nausea, vomiting, very severe chest pain. Your response, call 911, take 2 ASA tablets like aspirin or NyQuil. And then if it does lead to a stroke, which we're trying to prevent, then you want to make sure that you respond fast. So the FAST acronym for a heart attack or a stroke is F for face. So if you notice that one half of somebody's face starts to become kind of slumped, that's a really quick sign of a stroke. You want to see if their arm, if they have any numbness or tingling, speech becomes slurred, and T, time. Again, time is really of the essence because you don't want the person to lose consciousness or for them to stop breathing. Bleeding is another emergency. Again, if someone's bleeding, place a clear bandage on top of it, compress the wound. If the wound is really, really large, you can use a tourniquet. So a tourniquet is essentially something that wraps around an area above the wound and it's tight. So you want to perhaps do it 5 to 10 centimeters above the wound or 3 to 3 centimeters above the joint. You can see kind of an example of something that's tying something off on the right. And then allergies. So allergic reactions often present through an inability to breathe, throat tightening, rashes, swollen lips. When you really need an EpiPen is if you're unable to breathe, throat tightening, rashes. Some people have allergies like dust or pollen. Those might be less severe, might lead to seasonal allergies, like, you sneeze in the spring, or, you have some congestion then. But when you really need an EpiPen is, you can't breathe, your throat's getting really tight, rashes, swollen lips, wheezing. That's a really clear sign. So if you have an EpiPen, what you do is you remove the blue side and then insert the orange side into your upper leg. I don't have a picture of an EpiPen here. I wish I did so I could show you, but essentially an EpiPen is just a device that delivers a ton of adrenaline to your body. So you remove that blue cap and then you stick the orange side into your upper leg. And then here are some other medical emergencies, like nosebleeds. You want to tilt your head. You never want to tilt your head up. You always want to tilt it down. Perhaps someone has knocked out teeth. You can place the tooth in milk or saliva. If you have chemicals in your eyes, use an eye wash. If you have sprains or bone infection, use the Rice method, which is resting it, inclining it, making sure it's compressed and then elevated. Diabetic emergencies, and then also seizures. So for seizures, something that's really important is you don't want to keep the patient down or prevent them from going through a seizing episode. You want to make sure you protect their head with a pillow and give them enough space so that they don't hit anything or harm themselves. Yep, and these are some other medical emergencies like asthma or wounds. You can read through this later. All right, so now we'll move on into our interactive session. So it's just an online quiz that we can all do together. So I'll share my screen and you can go to this website. And then once everybody's joined, I'll go ahead and start it. It's just some quiz questions from the workshop today. And then while people are joining, I'll go ahead and answer some questions. Okay, so Mohammed, last name starting with A.
So I was going to ask if there any website can offer us a CPR certificate online.
Yeah, I wish I could offer you all a CPR certificate, but we're not certified by the Red Cross. This is more so to just get your understanding going about what CPR is in case you want to do it in the future or just some basic life-saving techniques. But unfortunately, we don't provide that as a certificate, but hopefully it'll make getting a certificate easier in the future.
Can you recommend me any website can offer me a certificate?
Yeah, some websites that do it are Red Cross associations. Those are good. And they have online courses too.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. All right. Mohammed, last name starting with W.
I want to ask a question. Is the program only 3 sessions or more?
It's only 3.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. All right, Mayar.
How can I measure a patient's pulse to know if this person is alive or dead?
Sorry?
How can I measure the patient's pulse to know if he alive or dead?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question. Are you asking like how do you know if someone is alive or dead? And then for people asking for the quiz link, I just sent it in the chat.
Yes, I think Mayar said this.
Yeah, okay. So if you're asking about how to tell whether someone's alive or dead, usually if they are postmortem, their body is cold, they're not breathing, you can't find a pulse, unconscious, things like that. Gabriella?
So I wanted to ask about the CPR part. So I heard this and I wanted to know if it was accurate or not, but I heard that CPR, it can get like so intense that some ribs might start breaking. And that's the only way to know if you're doing it right, and that if even if ribs start breaking or something like that happens, that it's worth it to just keep going to make sure the patient stays alive, even if the ribs break.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, basically I just wanted to know if that was true, and how like how do I phrase this? How do you know like when you can stop, or like how there's specific things you need to do with babies or with adults? Is it very strict to stay to that? Like if you don't know how to do it that certain way, can you do it? Do you just do the CPR any way you know how, or is it more important to wait for like the police?
Yeah.
Like those two.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point to bring. Yes, ribs can definitely break. This is a question I forgot to ask, but something that makes doing CPR on a pillow much easier than on a real person is that people have ribs. Your ribs are supposed to protect your lungs. So ribs very oftentimes do break or become fractured during CPR. And that's okay. If you hear ribs breaking, some people might think that, okay, it's time for me to stop doing my compressions. Not true. Keep going until EMS gets there. But yes, and it's different for, it's not really different for babies and children in that if you feel ribs breaking to stop, because in all three cases for adults, children, and infants, you keep going even if you feel the ribs breaking. But again, for babies, you use 2 fingers. The compression technique is different.
Please, can you tell me the steps for applying this quiz?
The stage for applying to what?
This quiz.
For this course, if you're asking for a CPR course, we can send out some helpful links for that. If it's more medical school related, then we can answer that question later.
I have a question. What if there was an earthquake? How can I help people?
If there's an earthquake, then in our first steps, remember that we check the scene and we check the area. So that's what we have to do first. And if we're checking the scene and there's an earthquake, it's not safe for us to perform.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Okay, I'll take 2 more questions and then we're going to start the quiz. Mena? Okay, Rahma?
At the beginning, thanks for your effort with us, but I have 2 questions. Is there a difference between person who stopped breathing and died one, or both people died? Second one, how can I help people who had snakes bite? Snakes.
I'm not sure about that one. I'm sorry, but if you're talking about like what's the difference between someone that's alive or perhaps not alive, again, your biggest priority is to just do CPR to deliver the rest of that oxygen to the blood out.
So is there a difference between stop breathing and died one?
Yeah, so there is a difference, but again, your biggest job is to just do CPR. EMS will come and determine that the person is deceased, but you're not supposed to do that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Fatma, and then we'll start the quiz. Okay, LDoc. Moving on to Asma.
Sorry, but I have a question.
Go ahead.
How can I do with this quiz?
Oh, we're going to start it soon. Okay, I'll go ahead and start the quiz now, and then I'll answer some questions after. All of the questions come from the workshop today. You don't have to look at my screen while you're doing it. I'm just going to be able to see like what people's scores are. You can just go ahead and do it at your own pace. If you have any questions I haven't gotten to yet, you're more than welcome to ask in the chat, and I can respond while people are doing the quiz.
May I ask? Is the test optional?
Again, if I haven't answered a question that you've asked yet, or you have yet to ask, please message me and I'll try to get to that now. And if you have your hand raised, you can just speak up. Yeah, the quiz is completely optional. It's just a fun way to test your knowledge in a more interactive way.
I got
So
a
we'll be
question.
wrapping up in a couple minutes after the quiz is done, and then you're more than welcome to head out. Yeah, we definitely understand that it's pretty late for some of you, so we don't want to keep you too long. Yeah, I'll just give everyone like a couple minutes to finish up. I think most people are almost done. I'll end the quiz in like 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap up for the day.
Can I ask what is the code again?
Quiz is not mandatory for submitting notes. We'll be able to, we'll release a form and then you can fill out that form. And then we'll calculate your volunteer hours for you because you'll attach your notes to that form. Do winners get a prize? I wish, but now this is just for fun. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the quiz now. Great job, everybody. A lot of you got a good portion of the questions right, which is awesome. I'll go ahead and end that now. Okie dokie. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our first session. We're so happy that you were able to join us today. I know there were a ton of questions that probably weren't answered today just because there are so many of you and not a ton of us hosting. So if we haven't answered your questions, please, please, please feel free to message me on Slack. I think I'm caught up on all of the questions that people have asked me. So please feel free to message me. I'm more than happy to go through that. Thank you so much for attending today. Again, our session is tomorrow at the same time as it was today. We'll have a guest speaker. We'll do another workshop. You can ask us questions there. There isn't anything for you to do for tomorrow besides just like get ready for the session. We'll also be doing a little bit of a discussion where we can talk about some topics. And we'll also be releasing our case study competition prompt tomorrow. If you have any interest in participating in that, we'll also be helping you find groups if you want to do that collaboratively. We'll be going through that prompt tomorrow. But if you don't have any questions, you're more than welcome to head out. Zoom automatically tracks your attendance, so you don't have to fill anything out for that. We'll see you all tomorrow, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for you, Daviana.
Thanks.
No worries.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for your
Thank
time. It
you.
was really nice.
Thank you so
Hey,
much.
have a good
Thank you,
time.
guys.
so much.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Nice to meet you.
everyone. Nice to meet you all too.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Umut,
Thank
and
you.
Zig, hi.
Thank you.